morning, Bears. It is a backwards day today. The whole world has gone crazy. Well, iTunes is what you would call not my friend this morning. That is the source for where my music is coming from, and maybe that needs to change. Maybe I need to get that set up elsewhere. Good night. I did multiple different things to get it to play what I told it to play, but apparently not. So yeah, and the outro, we'll be doing the intro music, right? That would only make sense. Oh man. So glad everybody could join us today. So ridiculous. Oh man. At any rate. Yeah, everybody missed the intro. Shoot, right? We're going to end the show when we begin the show. It's just going to be a backwards day. Well, trying a little bit different lighting today, seeing how that affects us. And I noticed all these people have these lights like behind them. So I was curious as to what that would do for me here. Doesn't look like it's doing much. I don't know. We'll certainly see. Yeah, I saw that, Dom. I'm sorry to say. Hopefully you can catch the replay later on, but yeah, meetings stink. I completely empathize. One of these days I'm going to gradually move the show further back to like 8:30 Central Time. We're going to get a little bit better. Oh no. Oh, yeah. So, first up on the agenda is to address some interesting things. Mr. Steve Pinder and I were having a little bit of a conversation this morning, and we were talking about sometimes the attention that either one of us has gotten from the ladies, and I was saying that I don't usually deal with too much of a struggle on that, and he's like, BDB, you're a good looking guy, I can say that, So yes, I've been officially hit on by Steve Pinder, so hashtag me too, No. I'm not gonna be launching any kind of investigations into Steve's past, and I'm also not bringing it up 30, 40 years after the fact. I'm pretzels, yeah, the live streaming snack of choice. Yeah, Baratic. Oh man, whew. That's not where I thought that was going to go. Oh. But honestly, how did I not think that that's where that was going to go? It's the Bears. I've never had an occasion for that kind of contact with Steve Pinder. No, it's not happened. Maybe this isn't the live streaming snack of choice. They're all loud in the mic. But, no, I know that, Baratic. It is a pound sign to me as well. I'm right behind you. Goodness. There's a way to start the day, right? So, seems prudent to me that we ought to move right into Rush right here and now. Oh, no, I'm sorry to hear that, Andrew J. I don't know that anybody needs to see that except Batman's wife, and that's it. If Batman is a straight man, and who's to know? After all he's been through, maybe he sees the world differently than the rest of us. At any rate, well, I can't say the rest of us. Who knows? I see. I was being set up there. I didn't see where that was heading. I need to be a little more on my game. Come on, coffee. Let's get going. So today is 3 months that I've been doing this show. This is episode 54 we're into here. It is the 20th of September, 2018. I'm thinking I'm going to get into a groove of like actually saying the date and the episode number like as we go forward. And it's probably good to mark those things that way. It's like an online video diary in a sense, not diary. I just lost points off my man card for saying that. Yeah, it's journaling. It's journaling in a sense. All right, whichever. That's fine. I've had diaries. I'll admit it. That's right. And I'm not, no, I'm totally embarrassed. And speaking of diarying, right? I don't know what this relates to speaking of diarying at all. Today's subject is going to be my favorite band of all time, and specifically the drummer of that band, Neal Peart of Rush. I've been deeply influenced by that drummer in particular, and I think in one of the most meaningful ways. Thank you, Steve. My man card has officially been revoked. I am now no longer allowed hunting with anyone. I will not be invited to any man caves. I can only drink wine, not beer, or other fruity type drinks. And I don't mean fruity in a gay way. I mean fruity as in actual fruit, but 6 of 1. At any rate. And I mean much love to all of you out there that happen to be members of the homosexual community. I've grown up with a father who worked in theater and was interacting with plenty of people that would see themselves as part of that community for a long time. So I'm okay with the gay. But not personally, just so that's clear, right? Though I still think you're doomed to hell. Let's just leave it. Oh man, no. I have my biblical scriptural views on that, and yet I love people wherever they're at in life with whatever things are going on. That could be a conversation for a day, one of these days. You know, it's an interesting thing because the climate, politically, the climate discussion wise, online has definitely changed, and we've got people out there that are partners with us in terms of fighting for free speech. We've got people that are of the Christian community in one form or another. People that are openly gay for one, or part of other elements of the LGBTQAIP two-spirited. I honestly don't know all the elements to the acronym at this point, and I've met many people who also don't know what all the current elements of the acronym are. But, we have common ground with people. I have common ground with people that I probably wouldn't have had in times previous. And I think that's pretty awesome, you know? Hey, Zach Bugas. By the way, I got your text, dude. Understand completely. And you're probably right as well on another another note with your attempt at the acronym there. That's probably more correct. No, punch away, Baratic. You're cracking me up, man. You're so funny. Yeah, man. Yeah, I was gonna put it out to the Bears here, as well. So here's the deal. I wanted to invite my good buddy Scott. I think he's not available, as he's told me, but and this is real last minute. I don't know anybody who's a musician or musically minded individual. My wife suggested that I try to invest and go into this music seminar. You know, or seminar, I guess, like an expo is the better term for it, that's going on in Nashville this Saturday. And that's a good 6.5 hour drive for me. But the tickets were like super, super cheap. And I got them when they were doing this like big discount thing going on. So I got a couple of them in case a buddy of mine wanted to go, because I didn't really have time to wait and find out from them. So I still have 2 tickets. I've asked my buddy Scott. I've asked Zach. Neither one of them are able to. And I wonder, is there a bear out there that is relatively not too far away from Nashville, Tennessee, and might be able to be there by about 9 or 9:30 Central Time? Or is that Central? I'd have to look. I think it's Central. I forget. Tennessee might be Eastern now that I think about it. But whatever, 9 a.m. local time there. 9:30 maybe at the latest. And then meet up with me because we got to go in together because both tickets have my name on them. But anybody that wants to learn more about songwriting, anybody that wants to learn more about some of the technology behind making it easier for people to have a musical career, how to properly market yourself, all these kinds of things, and the ability to network in Nashville, to meet lots of interesting folks. So potentially with which to work, and now with the advent of online technologies, you could be in different states and still work together, Yeah, I think you might be right, Zach. I don't think it does change until it's in Georgia, but yeah, I'm sorry you couldn't join me. Nashville is Central. Okay, cool. So 9:30 Central time then. If there's anybody amongst the Bears here who has an abiding interest in music and would be interested in meeting there, I would be glad to give you my ticket. And you maybe we could work out a deal. You can hook up some food at some point during the day. That could work out. I'm going to be driving in Friday night and then probably sleeping in the car or something like that, and getting up and doing this thing. And then it ends at 6 p.m. So then I'm going to drive home. I've got to play a church service the next morning. So, hey, there's Beautiful Lady Bear dropping a link for this. Feel free to check it out. Baratic says, if I were home, I'd roll with you. That's awesome, man. Missouri's forehead. Yeah, you're pretty up there then. I know what you're talking about. I drove across that. Yes, thank you, Beautiful Lady Bear. I appreciate that. My wife's watching the show. That's so sweet. She pops in from time to time. That's the Peoria Dogs logo, by the way. If you're not familiar with Peoria Dogs, she has a blog. She's gotten going a little bit here and there, and done some videos on YouTube for it as well, talking about dog-related issues going on in this area, in the greater Peoria area. So if you're ever curious, she has useful insights. Definitely check out peoriadogs.com. And that's my plug for Beautiful Lady Bear. Yeah, I understand that, Baratic, entirely. Let's see here. So yeah, if you know any bears that would be interested to go, I'd love to take a bear, especially someone that's been in this stream, somebody I know. I'd love to finally meet you and have an opportunity to do something. If you're into music, to do something with you musically, because there's all kinds of stuff going on there. I don't even know, but sounds like there's a lot of worthwhile knowledge to be gained, and at a fairly reasonable price, and the opportunity to connect with a lot of people. So I'd say grab up that opportunity, and then bring back the knowledge that we gain and find ways to use it. So I'm taking if they allow it in there, I'm taking a voice recorder, and gaining whatever I can from that, and listening back to some of the seminars, really trying to get some of that knowledge ingrained in my head. Hopefully they allow that. But yeah, that's going to happen this Saturday. So, well, Pacifist Anarchist, shoot, if you're available, if you can do it, you can meet me there by 9:30. We could do it, just as long as you're not, a weird, crazy person. You should probably check with me after the show in Hangouts. Get a hold of me through Hangouts, bigdrumbear@gmail.com. If you are actually available to do that, since it's fairly close for you, let me know. The thing starts at 10 a.m. And if we meet up at 9:30, make sure we're squared away, then that could work. Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, everybody's got schedules, and it is kind of last minute. But it's a worthwhile deal, Tickets would normally be like $45, and they were down like 20 something, way cheap. So got them while they were cheap, and it's a good deal. Tommy Lee will go with me. I don't think I'm gonna tie up an Asian and throw him in the back of my vehicle. I might run into some problems. I'm not Steve Pinder. I just can't go and do that. I don't have Steve Pinder's what we talked about before, animal magnetism, that draws the ladies' attention to him. far more than myself. And I'm perfectly, by the way, happy with not having a great deal of ladies' attention. I have one lady's attention, and that is all the attention I need. I wouldn't mind having her attention to my accumulation of shekels. If I could accumulate more shekels, that would probably make her happier. So that said, speaking of collecting on shekels, many of you may be aware that a certain comedian named Norm Macdonald popped in here yesterday, and he begrudgingly shared with you the availability of this shirt, Love Chunk or You're a Commie. And this is a wonderful piece that was graphically designed by Steve Pinder. Very grateful to him for that. You can get yours today at bonfire.com/don't-c-red-love-chunk. And I really love saying it that way. It's actually very funny and amusing to just me, if nobody else. But if you're not into red, there's several other colors that will work for you. And you can, at the same time of letting people know your contempt for communism, you can also let them know your love for Chunk. Chunk is my Mastiff Rottweiler. He is a 90-pound odd dog, at least the last I knew. He might be down in the 80s at this point because he's gotten easier to pick up. I wasn't used to, let me try to say that sentence again. Previously, I was not able to pick him up in times past. And more recently, it's been, what am I doing? That's not what I wanted. I want to go back to me. Times past, I've not been able to pick him up, and now I can. So I'm thinking he lost a few pounds. He's probably slimmed up. He's firmed up a little bit, with his muscular chunkadiness. But yes, his full name is Goalie, short for Goliath, Sir Chunk Poley. So it's like Goalie Poley instead of Roly Poly, but Goalie Sir Chunk Poley Chubbs Esquire. And that would be his full moniker, as it were. And at some point, perhaps we'll have a. They're reproducing asexually now. I wasn't even aware. It makes sense, though. Yes. At some point, maybe I'll have a shirt with him dressed in like the old English wig. That might be a fun thing with his full name. If you're seeking legal services. Hire Goalie Sir Chunk Poley and Chubbs Esquire. He will be on the case for you. A personal injury lawyer, and he'll just end up injuring you more by sitting on you. Oh, man. So funny. But it's been fun. It's been fun hawking this shirt for the last week and a half. And you've got 4 more days. 4 more days starting from today to get your Love Chunk or You're a Commie shirt. That will close. Let's see here. I'm gonna tell you because I've got the link up, but I want to say the exact thing. Orders will. Oh well, hang on. Let me backtrack this a second. You get 4 days, 13 hours, and 45 minutes. I believe that's right. Let me recycle that page just to be sure because it might be off. It's gonna take a moment to reload. It should be counting properly the whole time, and hopefully I'm not losing you as I'm doing this, because that'd be, not good. I don't need to lose people. I'm not a fan of that, despite what some might think. I'm going to close that. Oh, thank you, Steve. Yeah, we'll get round 2 of junk shirts out there. Steve says he's buying a second shirt tomorrow. That's awesome. That'll put us at 6. Yeah, in fact, I should bring this up and let you all see. This is what you'll find when you go to the campaign. Man, there's too many things on this OBS, I tell you. Here's what we'll do. We'll just bring up a window, and we'll show you a capture. Good old OBS. It allows you to do so many things. Boom. Just gonna cut right to it. Cuts are fun. I might start doing more cuts rather than fades all the time. But this is the Love Chunk or You're a Commie t-shirt. And you have 4 days, 13 hours, 44 minutes, and 31 seconds left to pick yourself up one. And it comes in these wonderful colors. Isn't that cool? But yeah, orders will start shipping October 2nd for this shirt. Those that have already bought it. Oh, by the way, the back of the shirt. That's the back of your shirt, right? So you can advertise Big Drum Bear and let everybody know that I'm on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat. I should have changed that. I should have put Twitter on there because I am now also on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at Big Drum Bear 1, right? That's the Twitter profile for those that are interested. You can always check that out. And I got weird pictures. Oh, I'm breaking the law right here. It's breaking the law. I had one of those dangerous straws, right? Wanted for deadly possession of a deadly straw with intent to suck. You got to watch out for that. Breaking the law, breaking the law. Any of you folks out there who remember good old Judas Priest. It's funny stuff. And anyway, where'd you all go? I lost you. I took I lost my. There we go. Yeah, that's good stuff. I remember I never had heard that song before because I was younger when that came out. I wasn't as aware of Judas Priest. And then my Uncle Dan, he introduced me to a bunch of interesting things as a kid, including Beavis and Butthead. He brought me into a recognition of good old Beavis and Butthead, and he said there's this great deal where Beavis and Butthead are needing to get this dog cleaned up, right? So they're out there like giving this dog a bath, and they start singing, the Judas Priest, but they change the lyrics and they go, washing the dog, washing the dog. So that was a running joke between Uncle Dan and me for years. He probably remembers it. Question for anybody. Give me some feedback. This lens flare that's in my face, are you digging that, or is that obnoxious? What do you think? It's weird to me, but if you guys like it, then I'll keep it. Oh, very cool, Moomin. Appreciate that. Cowboy Bear, welcome. Glad we get a cowboy in here. It's always good to have new folks. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment. Always important when you're a new person, I tell you that. Anybody know Cowboy Bear? Anybody vet him? Cowboy Bear says, get rid of that lens flare. I've been touched by God. I'm huge now, huh? That's awesome. I love being on the big screen. You got to send me a picture of that. Send me a picture. You know what? Tag us in Twitter, right? Add us in Twitter. And I know that Steven Crowder does this sometimes, but how do you get down with Big Drum Bear? How do you watch? Show us your setup, take a little picture of that. If you're doing it from your phone, that might be difficult. But phone and camera are the same thing now. Like, I don't have a separate camera. What are you talking about? Yeah, if you got pictures, tweet us and tag us with at Big Drum Bear 1, add us in there and just say something like hashtag BDB stream setup. BDB stream setup or something cool like that. That's probably a lame hashtag. I don't know. Somebody come up with a better hashtag than that. That's kind of lame. While I fix this lens flare in my face. I'm not J.J. Abrams. I don't need lens flares all over the place. It's just getting worse. Let's see here. We'll just have it right in your face. Oh, and I knocked my trumpet over. That's not good. Let's see. Oh, that's the opposite of good. Okay, I wanted to show you all something. The professional quality of the show just goes through the roof. Hey, Fairbear. Welcome. Good to see you. Well, I'm going to have to get some pliers and get that mouthpiece back out. But years ago, when my folks moved into a place over in East Peoria, we'd been there for about half a year or so, and I found a trumpet in the basement underneath the stairwell, and it belonged to the son of the lady who used to live there. And that kid who used to play that trumpet, her son, he played in the band at the middle school where I was going to with the same band director. So years later, found this thing, got it cleaned up a little bit, got some of the dings and dents taken out of it. It's got plenty more now, but it's It's probably a good 50-some years old, because it was at least 30 years old when I found it. But it's an Olds Ambassador, and it was a decent trumpet back in the day. Now it's seen better days, but it still functions. Not for me, though, because I don't remember how to play trumpet too well. Yeah, I need valve oil. That's my problem. Valve oil. I haven't touched a trumpet for so long. I just pulled this out of the garage the other day and was trying to get it fixed a little bit, make sure the valves were in the right place. I need valve oil, definitely, and that would help because they are sticky. But hey, I remembered it. How about that? You never know what you're going to get when you come here. Weird, terrible trumpet playing. It can happen. Yeah, get some coffee, Kodiak. Good to see you. Where's the yak? That's so funny, man. Yes, Peoria is a wonderful city, Old Bear. You're absolutely right. So I missed it because I was playing trumpet. Bust out some ska. That's funny, pacifist anarchist. Actually, I used to be in a ska band back in the day. It was called Wasted Time. It was a metal ska band. It was a fusion between metal and ska, and it was actually it was kind of fun. Some of the guys from that band are still in a band together. Oh gosh, I can't remember their name. I'm gonna have to plug them because I ran into their drummer some months ago. Troy Teeny was his name, is his name still, and they're doing like Dream Theater-y type stuff, and they're doing a pretty decent job of it from what I hear, but I've never heard them play much yet. I'd like to. Yeah, they're trying to gig around here, do some stuff, so yeah, but those guys are still rocking, doing their band stuff. Let's see. Oh man. Hashtag get down with big drum. That could be it, Honky. That could work. Hashtag get down with big drum. Yeah, that could be your hashtag when you hit me up on Twitter and show me your setup. Yeah, Cowboy, thank you for the recommendation of getting rid of that thing. Let me if Cowboy's known, then Cowboy's modded, right? Only to lose it a short time from now. Like I'm telling you, mods are going to go down when we hit that 1,000 mark. So make sure we get to that so you can lose your mod ship. Oh man, I'm totally injuring my growth in this channel. Right? I'm totally like counterproductive to that whole thing. It's kind of funny. There was somebody else floating around in here that was trying to vet Cowboy. That was Matt R. Who is Matty R? Anybody seen Matty R around? Do we know Matty R? Matty R looks cool. Well, cool, Matty R. Hopefully you're not a troll, but usually you guys aren't. All right, so. Well, wait a minute. All right, we're trying to get to Rush here. It's kind of getting kind of a slower pace today, but we're not going to be doing this thing the whole time. Yeah, I figured he was in the app. Okay. Matty R, you're awesome. I've seen you around. You're a doxer. You're horrible. You're awful, Andrew J. Oh man, that's awesome. That's so good. You're that Justin Trudeau bear, aren't you, Matty R? Matty R stole my rights. Do, 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 do. I gotta get the guitar out and play a guitar version of that at some point. So all right, Rush and my history with Rush. Let's get to it. So I was 12 years old, and I'd go to watch my mom play in this Christian rock band that she was in here locally. Big Riggin', hey. And I'm confused why you don't already have Modship, because I'm a subscriber of your channel, and you've been on here a number of times. You should have had this. Sometimes I've modded people, and then the mod somehow disappears. Like, I don't know what happened. You know, somehow somebody doesn't have a Modship anymore, and I don't know how that worked out. But Big Riggin', definitely. I enjoy your stuff, man. I've been checking out some of your streams, dude. Go check out Big Riggin'. Big Riggin' does streams from the road. You know, he's in his truck doing stuff, and it's pretty cool. I dig it. Oh, you're fine, kick ya. Hey, by the way, that reminds me, I almost forgot. Well, you know what? I'm going to do it later. I'm going to do what I was thinking later, because I'm never going to get to what I said I was going to get to. So I need to make sure I get to it. Let's see here. Rush. I'm going to talk about that right now. So I was 12. My mom was in this Christian rock band. I'd go to watch rehearsals, and I'd sit behind the drummer. And their drummer, I should say, David Waibel, he was my first drum teacher. And eventually I started taking lessons from him. And then when I came over to his house to take my first lesson, he played some music for me. And I heard this crazy high-pitched voice. This really was weird, bizarre thing. And cowboy. Okay. All right. I'm going to not look at the chat for a minute, even though you guys are so funny. I love it. Keep chatting away. Do your thing. I love it. Went over to David's house, and he was playing music from the Moving Pictures album from 1981. I heard Tom Sawyer. I heard some Red Barchetta. I heard Limelight. I heard YYZ. These were the songs, right? And I was hearing Neal Peart's drumming, and my mind was just getting blown. By the way, in the title, I call it The Professor, right? That Neal has often had the nickname The Professor, though I don't think he ever went and got like any kind of advanced degrees or anything like that, because they all went. I mean, he might have subsequently, you know, in his later years done some things, but largely they started touring right out of high school. They got busy with that pretty quick. Hey, Kodiak, good to see you, man. So they got on the road really early in their career. They didn't start with Neal Peart, oddly enough. They started in 1968, September 18th. And that was the day that band was formed. And at the time, they had a different bass player guy, singer guy, who I don't recall the name of. But that didn't work for too long, and they ended up, I think, working out with Geddy Lee, or Gary Lee Winrib, I guess is his full name, which you can find. It's not secret information too much. It's just mostly people don't know unless they're fans. Alex Zovanovich, better known as Alex Lifeson, and these two guys worked well together, created some good music, along with a drummer named John Rutsey, and the three of them did stuff together. But Rutsey, I think, as they got going, they did their first album, and they were getting some success with it. But Rutsey was, you know, their manager was seeing he was not going to be in a position to do well on the touring. John Scofield is the professor. Well, many people would say, but people have also called Neal Peart the professor for many a year. And I knew of that long before I knew of Scofield. So great though Scofield is, right? Great though John Scofield is. Got nothing but praise for that. That was amazing. Yeah, John Rutsey was I guess more of a raucous breed, you know, and there were concerns that he was not going to be able to do well, and possibly the band was not going to survive well if they continued forward with him. So sadly, they had to let John go, but they brought in, they had ouditions and stuff, and they got this guy who, strangely enough, had been raised by a farming family outside of Toronto, I guess, and I'm trying to think now. He was into drums since he was about 12. He got drum lessons for his birthday one year, and he was massively influenced by Gene Krupa. Watched that movie when he was a kid a whole bunch and really got into it. Played along with the radio, so he just developed versatility, just be able to play with anything that came on. And he, when he turned 18, he wanted to deeply try to get into this music thing, so he figured, I'm going to go to London. And his whole plan was, I'm going to get the addresses off a bunch of record jackets and stuff that I have, and go to the record companies and say, hey, you know, I'm a drummer. I'd like to work for you. I'd see what I can do. So his dad helped him put a shipping crate together, box up his drums, and he got off on his way, had saved up his money for years to go to London. And he did this. He would walk around to all these different record companies that he knew about over there and say, yeah, I'd be interested to work for you. And they'd be like, well, you're very brave, the receptionist would tell him, you know. In his own mind, he thought, well, that was pretty much their way of saying I was an idiot or I was a fool. But yeah, he had that experience being over there. He got to work with a bunch of different bands in the pop scene in London, and get some great wealth of drumming experience working with a whole bunch of different people. But he, after a year or so of that working, he said in Piccadilly Circus and such, he decided to come home. He said that was enough of that. It wasn't really working out. And he figured maybe I'll just have to, you know, give up this idea and work on the farm with the family, do that kind of thing. And then he got this call from somebody new that said, hey, there's this band, Rush, that's looking for a new drummer, and you want to audition? So he's like, well, okay, cool. He goes to do that, and they're just mind blown. Like this, yeah. And they sit and talk with him for a while first, and they find out that they have a lot of similar interests. They're big fans of Tolkien books and things like that. And they seem to hit it off well. And it's been one of the greatest bands of all time since 1975. They haven't had a member change. I think it was 75 when, it might have been earlier than that. I got to think about that. I got to go look it up. The album that was released at that time was just the self-titled album Rush. And you had a lot of all the tunes on the original self-titled album are played with John Rutsey on drums. But then here comes Neal. And anytime you see them do stuff from the original first album with Neal, like live, it's his own spin on it. You know, his own proclivities pour into those songs, and it's so much fun. Like, I love hearing them play Working Man, right? Love hearing them play Working Man. It's so good, right? But when Neal's playing, I mean, I love the old John Rutsey thing, and in fact, I have a student, Chris Joy. He's a great musician. You need to look him up on Bandcamp. You need to look him up. Go buy his stuff. He's got a couple new albums he just released recently. I'm going to tell you the name of one of them. And it's a lot of music that you could use as like backing tracks for like film and television stuff. But it's really interesting. I mean, it's really, really insightful kind of stuff. And I'd check it out. Hang on. I've got the name of the album right here. The Hunt, excuse me. In fact, if he doesn't mind, later on, maybe I'll play a track or two from The Hunt and give you guys a look-see at what that's all about. And if I get hit with some copyright stuff, I'll only do like 30 seconds or something. But I'm sure he wouldn't mind if I give you a preview and let you check out some of his composing ability. But Chris is a graduate of Berklee College of Music, and he's a bass player. He's phenomenal. He also got his degree over there, I guess, in writing scores for film and television. And he does that on the side. I mean, he works like computer networking type stuff. He's really good at it. But his main passion is to write music. And he's had that side business for a long time of creating stuff for film and television. He does a good job. So he hired me. He and I were playing together in the Illinois Central College Jazz Band. He came in and sat in on bass quite often. Played some stuff with us. He's just ridiculous. So good. And he's always sending me clips of amazing drummers and things like that. He's so psyched about music. I love his attitude. Great guy. It's Joy, Joye. You want to look him up. Chris Joye. Got to check him out. I think he has chrisjoymusic.com as a website that you can go to. It's worth checking out. But yeah, he wanted to learn to play drums better. And not only did he do that, but he hired me to teach him, and he bought a drum kit off me, which he still has. And he's killing it, man. And he's gotten better and better and better. I watched him increase along this time. And at one point we were working on Working Man. I brought in Working Man, and he was getting the groove for Working Man down. I've got an old video on my Steady in Time Facebook page somewhere of me teaching him the Working Man groove, and he's picking it up. A little bit at a time, he's getting it. And it was really cool. It was really neat to see, because that's not a simple groove. You know, your simple groove is going to be like something like playing on the hi-hat, the two cymbals that come together like this, and you do it with your foot to make them come together. You're playing on the hi-hat, right? You're like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. And you're hitting the snare on beats 2 and 4 of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and the bass drum would be on like beats 1 and 3. Boom, chat, boom, chat, boom, chat, boom, chat. The simple groove. And Working Man was much faster than that. And it's got those boom, boom, it's a boom, it's got that syncopation because it throws 16th note figures into the bass drum, and it just makes the music skip forward a little bit. You kind of have the feeling of it that skips along a little bit more in that groove, and it's kind of funky. And Rush has always had a little bit of a funkiness to him. So we were working on that. It was a good groove for him to really get his mind around and see how it's broken down a little bit. So we had fun. We had fun learning that, and I watched this guy grow as a drummer. It's been fun to be able to bring in my influences, right? Stuff that I got me into drumming, and share that with kids or adults or whoever I'm teaching. But then that's primarily what I did when I was growing up. I played Rush songs. I put the CDs on that I got a hold of. I got so many Rush CDs, and I would have this speaker set up. My folks had this old receiver system, and it had you could have a turntable, tape player, CD player all plugged into it, and then big speakers to play it out of. So I had these in my room in the basement, and I'd pop that on and play along to it. Not headphones. I'd be playing the blasting speaker and playing along with that. Eventually I did some headphones, but largely it was the big speaker. So I'd put on stuff like Tom Sawyer, Spirit of the Radio, as I began to learn about the Permanent Waves album. Let's see, what else was I playing? Jacob's Ladder, still one of my favorites to play. 2112. And that was a bit of a monster. I could play parts of that, but I could never play it all the way through. There was just so much to it. Such a huge, epic tune. And if you're not familiar, that original song was like 7 parts. And the total length was... hey, thank you for popping some Chris Joy stuff up there, Best Answers. You rock, man. Yeah, definitely check out Chris. He's such a good dude. Such a good dude. So I would... I lost my train of thought a little bit there. I would be working on a variety of different Rush tunes at any given time. And that was largely what I'd try to work on. Well, 2112, that's what I'm saying. Listen to that song because it's 21 minutes and 12 seconds long, total length for all 7 parts put together. Usually in shows and stuff, they'll only play the first 2. They'll play the overture and then the Temples of Syrinx, right? And it's all based off this weird poem about the future and how it's controlled by an orthodoxy, and these priests that tell you what you need, what you need to listen to, what you need to think. And here comes these guys who say we're going to stand up against it and say no, we need to be able to be free to think how we think differently, right? Kind of like what we're all about today. Interesting. Boy, my eyes look googly when I do that because of the shadows. I don't know, I just look kind of like I was Cookie Monster for a second. At any rate, My throat's just bubbling. I bet that came on the mic. That's kind of funny. Weird things happen in a live stream. You can just go with it, you know? So, yeah, I would spend an awful lot of time by myself working on these things and figuring out more and more Rush stuff. I'd have new people that I'd meet that teach me about Rush stuff I didn't know about yet, because Rush had a huge catalog. They put out an album almost every year for most of their career. The full catalog of Rush albums, I'll just run that down real quick because this is worthwhile. You started with Moving Pictures. That was what I started with. Rush, the self-titled album, which had songs like In the Mood and Working Man, stuff like that. There's some of the good ones, some of the really good ones. Finding My Way. Then they had their next album come out, Fly By Night, you know, and that had some really cool Tolkien-influenced stuff on there. In the End is on that album. By Tor and the Snow Dog. That's an amazing tune. And if you go watch the Rush in Rio tour, is it Rush in Rio? It may have been either that or was the R30 tour. You can get either one of those on DVD. And they have like video graphics playing on stage in the background. It's like a whole animated cartoon thing to go along with By Tor and the Snow Dog. And it's so flippin' cool, man. They have like robots fighting and all this kind of stuff. It's neat. It's a neat representation of that. But I'd check that out. Fly By Night, great album. Let's see what others were favorites. Well, Caress of Steel was the next one to be released, and it had some fantastic tunes on there. I think Anthem was off of Caress of Steel. I don't remember if Lakeside Park was on that album or not. I think Lakeside Park was off of Caress of Steel. Another one of my favorites. Bastille Day. Bastille Day is one of my favorites too. That's such a good tune. They're just, you could see them taking more shape, getting more cohesive, and just having more punchiness behind what they're doing. More in-depth songwriting as each album goes. You can see the major difference between the self-titled album and then Fly By Night. Huge difference between the two in the direction of their songwriting. The lyrical content just steps way up. Yeah, Anthem's such a fun tune. I'd be playing clips of these right now. If what I'll do eventually is learn all the copyright rules and laws and stuff and figure out what's fair use, how I can play that back. Because that'd be a great stream to just play back some of my favorite Rush tunes and analyze them a little bit. Talk about drumming wise, what's happening and what really affected me about it. And if there's, I know there's fair use rules that allow you to do stuff like that because I've seen plenty of channels that do it. I just don't know what they are. So I want to make sure I'm familiar with them. And I don't want to create more problems for my channel by doing things without, having researched it enough before I do it. But let's see here. So there was Caress of Steel was that album. And then came 2112. And that blew people's minds. That's still heralded as one of the greatest of all time from them. Such an epic album. After that, they came back with another one called Hemispheres, I think was after 2112. Hemispheres was the next one after that. And Hemispheres, they're dealing with stuff. Was it? Yeah, I'm right. I'm just trying to keep it straight in my head. They had Cygnus X1 was off of that album. That was a flippin' cool tune. Cygnus X1, man. I don't think Xanadu was on that album, was it? Yeah, maybe Xanadu was on. Maybe Xanadu was on Hemispheres. That must have been where that was from. I'd have to go back and look. Yeah, that crazy stuff they did in the 70s. And here in 79, they come out with Permanent Waves. That's where they really started taking even. It was another big step between Hemispheres and Permanent Waves. Even drumming wise, the overall tone. Yeah, Farewell to Kings. I almost left that one out. That came after 2112. Then was Hemispheres. So in between those two, that's where it is. I'm doing all this from memory. I didn't even look it up today. Hey, Glampin, good morning to you. We're just talking about the history of Rush and my influence by them, and specifically the drummer Neal Peart. Yeah, so we have this Farewell to Kings album that had, you know, tunes like The Trees and Closer to the Heart, right? And or did The Trees come later? Maybe The Trees came later. Maybe they weren't on the same album. I'd have to go look to be sure. But yeah, we fell in love with Farewell to Kings. So many good tunes off that. Farewell to Kings is a great tune. So much fun with that. Learning those ones and playing that. And just the song structures got more lyrical, more I dropped something. I don't even know what just fell down. The joys of doing a live stream by yourself. I'm thinking that was the cat. I think the cat just knocked something over because cats do that. They're professionals. Yeah, The Trees was Hemispheres. My instincts were right. Thank you. Best Answers. Best Answers is right on that. So you can be fact checking me, right? You can be fact checking me as I go on. If I say something off, Best Answers is going to get me. Please do. Hey, Jewel. Good to see you, man. Glad you're in here. I've seen you off and on, but I didn't say anything. Yes, Mayor is a big Rush freak. We were having Mayor and Pinder and I were having a chat about that this morning before I did the show. Loved his Rush. So he's probably loving every bit of this right now if he's getting a chance to listen. So let's see here. So we did the Farewell to Kings, and that was a definite. It was similar to 2112 in some ways, in that it had some of that same tonal quality. And Hemispheres was a lot like that too. But then they move into this phase with Permanent Waves, where they had The Spirit of the Radio, they had Jacob's Ladder, they had some Natural Science. Oh my gosh, that tune was still one of my favorites because it's got so many different little parts to it, so many different little phases throughout that song that blow my mind. It starts out just real relaxed and chill, and then it gets into this arpeggiated chord thing going, and you get the rhythm going off of that. So it's like syncopated. It makes it feel like it's in 3 or 6 kind of feel like, you know, but it's still in 4/4 time. It's still regular normal time. They just break it up different. Then they go into a 7 thing, right? And then to get to play in 7 as a drummer, when you're only exposed to a lot of people, majority of people who want to play boring 4/4 stuff, and there's some good 4/4 stuff, don't get me wrong. There's some great tunes out there. People know how to make good quality music. But the majority of stuff you're exposed to, at least at this point in time in my life, was just, you know, your run-of-the-mill stuff you're going to hear on the radio, and here's stuff that you just don't very often, and it's awesome. It's like, man, I have to think in odd numbers to be able to count this and keep it all together, and it's fun. It's just so different. I'm using both sides of my brain to keep this all connected. Yes, wheels within wheels in a spiral array. Boy, Neal Peart as well was the lyricist once he joined the band. That's one of the big things that changed them. Like, all of the lyrical content was coming from this guy's mind, and he just had a bizarre way of looking at things, which I love, you know, but that also influenced his drumming. So he was willing to go into these weird 7 things, you know, and they didn't even necessarily always understand it mathematically. Most of what they were doing was instinctive, right? Alex Lifeson, the guitar player, I was just watching an interview of his from the other day, and that's how I learned that it was Rush's 50th anniversary. It popped up in my YouTube feed, probably because it was Rush's 50th anniversary. And he mentions, the band started on the 18th of September in 1968. But he was also talking about how he would write parts, and he's very instinctive. He doesn't read music well. He can read it. He can play classical pieces and read them all down and get good at it, but he doesn't do it regularly enough to be like a really good reader. But when he says that, he's comparing himself to like amazingly talented people. So he's still stinking good, right? But they didn't usually think about stuff back in the day in terms of how they're writing it. They're just thinking, oh, we'll drop a beat or we'll add a beat here to make a change, you know, do something weird, and then expect Neal to figure it out. when he's listening back to the stuff that they've come up with and he's adding the drum parts to it, he's like, oh, now I gotta drop a beat here and figure out how that groove works. And then later he'd go through and kind of, oh, okay, like say the latter portion of Jacob's Ladder was, in alternating measure of 6 and measure of 7 beats, Yes, and that was going to bring me to my next favorite. I should have gone back and mentioned that because I believe this tune was off of, was it Farewell to Kings or Hemispheres? I want to say La Villa Strangiato was on, La Villa Strangiato was probably on, well, I want to say La Villa Strangiato was in Hemispheres. I really do want to say that. I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to go look it up. Best answers. La Villa Strangiato. Was that on Farewell to Kings or Hemispheres? Watch him say a totally different album. It was on one of those two. I get the two mixed up sometime, but I'm pretty sure it was on Hemispheres. I was wrong. It's Farewell to Kings. La Villa Strangiato, still one of my favorite tunes of all time. You think I know my Rush, but obviously I don't. All right, so we do the permanent waves thing. We get great tunes like Natural Science and of course Spirit of the Radio, which most people know. That's a good one. And then we get into moving pictures, where I got onto Rush's train with the Tom Sawyer and YYZ, Red Barchetta, some of these tunes that are iconic, and Rush is really, really coming into their own by this point. I mean, they're accomplished at this point in time. They've been writing songs for a good while now. They've gotten into the flow of things, and drummers all over the place, even non-drummers, know that song. Circumstances, yes. Man, I haven't listened to that song forever. I'm going to, today, I'm going to listen to some Circumstances. I'm going to listen to all the Rush catalog that's favorites of mine. For a long time, what I had was like this Chronicles. Chronicles was like a double disc retrospective album, going back and looking at a bunch of their work previously. And really enjoyed that. It had some great tunes on there. Really gave me a good breadth of their whole catalog at that point. But, eventually I'd have to go back and, of course, Joel is Mayor. I knew that. I remember you using your other YouTube name before. Let's see here. So Joel's my other, keeping me in straight in line here. I keep forgetting because you guys trick me with these little weird, secret YouTube names. All right, so I can't believe 18 people are watching right now, listening to me talk about Rush albums. All I'm doing is just counting their chronology here, and this is great. I'm glad people are enjoying it. It's fun. All right, so where are we? We're at Moving Pictures. That blew my mind, and that was my introduction. But then years down the road, I'm coming back, finding out what these original albums were for some of these songs that I learned off the Chronicles discs, and so the next one out. It's that picture that Hugh Sim, their artist guy for all the album cover stuff, did on Signals was the name of the album. And you got this dog peeing on a fire hydrant thing. Signals, great album because you got tunes like Subdivisions in there. That's one of my favorites of all time. Subdivisions, another amazingly difficult challenge to play. And this is what I liked about this in my drumming upbringing. I'm getting such a huge catalog to draw from, and it's got lots of different stylistic elements that are largely rock, but they delve into other subgenres of that, right? There's lots of different little things that I'm introduced to in the way that these guys orchestrate their music. So I'm also having to pay deep attention to complex orchestrations at a very young age. So that was my introduction to drumming. That's what I learned to pay attention to. So when I went to music courses at Illinois Central College, and I'm taking ear training / sight singing. Whenever our teacher, Professor Stout, would give us a rhythmic dictation we'd have to do, he would say, okay, here's a rhythm. I'm going to play one note on the piano. It's going to be something like, you guys can hear that, right? It'd be something simple like, something crazy like that. And I'd have to figure out what was going on in this piece. He might tell us the time signature, right? But in that time signature, we'd have to dictate what that rhythm was. We'd have to write it all out. We'd have to transcribe it. I had a feeling somebody would drop a comment like that when I say dictation. He'd dictate to us, you know, here's a rhythm. So don't mind the extra notes play. That's not supposed to be happening, but I'm reaching all the way over here to get to my keyboard. And we'd have to figure out, like, how do you count that, right? How do you count the weird rhythms? So, like, for example, if I'm listening to, if I'm counting the beginning riff on Subdivisions, it's G, right? No, it'd be E. It'd totally be E. Yeah, little Subdivisions melody there, but that intro rhythm, bum 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 bum. So it's in 7. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. And I'd have to be able to place things like that just by hearing it once, right? Been listening to Rush since I was 12, and so I'd hear it once, maybe twice, and I'd be done. You'd have the rest of the classroom. It was like the 5th, 6th, 7th time the teacher played it through, and they're still trying to write it out. And I'm like, done. You know, it's like, it hit me, right? The rhythmic breakdown on that stuff wasn't hard. I might have had one or two where I might have had to hear it a third time, but largely I'm like, oh, boom, got it. You know, and thankfully I had been taught decent sight reading, so I knew how to write that stuff down. But I think about high school time frame in my career of Rush education, you know, if you will, my play out of Rush education, I met this guy who was a bigger Rush fan than I ever considered being. And his name was Chris, but I don't remember his last name now. And he's so good. Such an amazing drummer. Played snare drum in the marching band at high school. And he let me borrow his copy of Rush transcriptions, like the drum set transcriptions. So for the first time, I was able to actually see notation representations of these Rush tunes, right? And they were blowing my mind. It was like, it looks like this? It was too cool. Too cool. And I was so excited about it. So then I'm able to visualize in standard notation what these parts look like. And then when I heard all this stuff that I've been listening to for years at that point, now I could recognize it if I saw that same type of rhythm. I'm like, oh, I know that rhythm. That's from like Permanent. Well, that's from Moving Pictures, you know, album, or Permanent Waves. Like a particular song. Like I've seen that rhythm in Subdivisions, or I've seen that rhythm in Spirit of the Radio. Like I totally know what they're doing there. The intro to Spirit of the Radio, by the way, going back just a step, that's stupid. I still don't to this day remember what time signature that's in. For years, I didn't know what was going on in YYZ. I just knew how to feel it properly. And now I know that YYZ, you know, the ding, 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 that whole thing is Morse code for the letters YYZ, which is the airport identification code for the Toronto airport. And they turned it, Morse code, into a rhythm, which happens to be in 5/4. So when I figured out that whole section is in 5, you know, that I can count it now, right? But I almost don't have to because I've played it for so long I can feel it. The only times I'd have to is when it totally cuts out, right? There's a section in that intro where they totally stop and there's a pause, and I have to learn to count the pause properly. But it's, you know, it's in 5, and so it's not too hard. And then they move it over into 4/4 time, and they'll come back for some other weird stuff later on. But being able to understand what's going on. I mean, if you're not a musician, you probably don't understand what I'm talking about sometimes when I say these time signature things and all that kind of stuff. But that's the wonderful thing about this podcast. You don't have to, I'm using musical technical terms, but I'm trying to bring it into common parlance, if you will, and get across the bigger idea, which is this stuff. This is how it grabbed a hold of my attention. This is how it propelled me forward to dig more into music, to understand more about what it was that I was pursuing, right? And what was so awesome about it, what power it had behind it to communicate. That's the biggest thing. That's the hugest part for me. Ultimately, what I do as a musician is to want to increase people's ability to communicate, no matter what walks of life they're from, right? I talked about it earlier in the beginning of this podcast. I was being silly about me having a diary or something and that being gay, something more connected with, I guess, feminine qualities in a sense, or men who might have that. For me to do that seemed a little questionable. But I say that in love and in jest, right? And not because I'm anti-homosexual or something like that. It's like, no, I love people regardless of where they come from in their walks in life. I'm a weird dude. And I hope that some people love me from time to time, Pinder says, yes, you're very gay. It's true. No, I don't have any kind of hatred, and I think we should be able to, if people can call me a weird straight dude all they want to, right? It's a hashtag not gay person. I think that's riotously funny. And I have been able to find common ground with people that come from a completely different view of the world, a completely different perspective on how they process the stuff that comes at them in life. I've been able to think about how can I connect with those people better and understand what they understand better? Because maybe they understand something that I'm missing, right? And vice versa, right? I can get some of that happening, more communication, rather than, well, you're totally different than me. I'm not even going to try. I see that happen far too often. People are unwilling to even try. And I hate that. I despise that. I want people to be able to, say silly things about one another and laugh and enjoy it and have fun. That we should be able to do that, right? I have weird idiosyncrasies about me. I'd love for people to goof on them. I goof on them regularly, right? About the white straight males in general. We have funny things about us. We should be able to laugh at them. That's a good thing, right? We should be able to talk with each other about that kind of stuff, and have fun with it, right? And let it be something that endears ourselves to one another, right? So music helps me do that. Music is a vehicle through which I do that. Humor is a vehicle through which I do that, right? And maybe something that I find funny, you may not. That's fine. Maybe some music that I enjoy, you may not. But there's probably going to be points of humor and points of music where we do connect. They're vehicles for communication, right? So that we keep the swords sheathed and not bloodshed happening, right? The more we can talk, the less we're killing one another. And we've never been doing that at any other time in history more than we do it now. And what I'm saying is we don't talk as much as we do now, right? It's part of why I do this podcast, part of the big reason why I do it, because I have the ability to talk through things, to work through things, instead of it becoming a war, instead of it becoming contentious. And it might get contentious at times. That's possible. But if you try to put focus on those things that allow us to have common ground, right? That allow us to, and common ground, let me just caveat that in here while I'm saying that. That in and of itself is not a virtue, right? Communication is the virtue. Communication is what's important, right? Maybe sometime I might have to communicate myself very sternly and clearly, and we might not get along by it, right? We might not get along if I have to take a stand on something, and we find out, hey, we're just not going to be able to connect on this point. Maybe not at all. Maybe that'll happen. But if I'm not learning how to clearly communicate myself, I leave confusion, right? I leave the room for unnecessary misunderstanding, unnecessary conflict, right? Why have conflict if we don't need to, right? And we should be able to think freely, speak freely in order to do that. Doesn't mean that when you're speaking freely, words that you say won't necessarily have consequence. Of course, there's going to be consequence, but not necessarily legislative consequence. That could be a bad thing. That leads to bad stuff. Always has. Like starvation and genocide, not to mention, plenty of others. But that aside, that little caveat off to the side, that's the bigger picture concept of why all this is so important to me. And Rush really inspired me to dig down that road and discover that was the bigger point, right? They got deep in their lyrical content. They got deep in their musical construction. They really wanted to tell a story through their songs, and that made me appreciate that kind of music far more. It made me not say, oh, well, the popular thing is to just listen to whatever's on the radio, and that's fine. I can enjoy radio stuff way better than I used to, but I almost had a contempt for it growing up, because it just didn't go far enough. It didn't nourish me. It didn't feed me. Stuff like this nourished my brain, made me think, made me use the thinky parts, right? Koala bears have really smooth brains, right? Thanks to Frank 1. I learned that from watching your videos. And you may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he was accurate on that point. They tend to have very smooth brains. They don't have nearly as much of the wrinkles that we have within our brain tissue. And that allows us to be better thinkers, the way that construction works. It allows our brains to function better in that way. Koala bears are fairly simplistic animals, from what I understand. So don't be a koala, right? But do use your thinky parts, right? Encourage them to grow. Listen to complex music. Listen to interesting things that make your mind structure itself in a way that allows you to engage with the world in a more meaningful way. That's what I got out of a lot of this. I'm just looking back at some of the chat. Interesting ideas people are putting out here. Gotcha, Baratic. Baratic was saying I'm mildly dyslexic. Nice. I like it when dyslexic people will call it dyslexic. That makes it even funnier when I do it. I'm like, I can do this because I've got people who call it dyslexic, right? That's why I can say funny things about like, oh, that's gay. I have gay friends who say the same stuff, right? Who use that in that way, and it's like it's a pass. There's plenty of people within that community that will use language in that way, and it's amusing, right? I think there's plenty of cis white male pejoratives as well. It's not really pejorative. It's just a silly word. It's used in different levels. I'm mildly dyslexic, so my spot read is abysmal. Like sight reading stuff. I see what you're saying. I can read and write music fine, just not on the spot. Brain and hands move at different speeds. Yeah, I bet that's got to be maddening. It would take a considerable amount of training to overcome that, I would imagine. And I bet you've done plenty thus far. There we go. Dyslexics of the world untie. That's one of my favorite jokes for the longest time. I love that. Oh, man. My mom used to say bad spellers of the world untie, but dyslexics is funnier. Love it. I wondered if it would be, I would have thought it would have been like backwards. Like, I don't even know how to say that backwards now. I had a joke, but it's not coming quick enough. Guys are cracking me up today. So funny. Anyway, I'm going to finish this thought on Rush, and I'm going to get through the chronology because I'm almost done, and it's been an hour 15 almost. So we're probably going to call it before too long here. Death occurred at 10:30 hours. All right. So we were at Signals. After Signals, I discovered, came an album called, now I have to think. See, getting into the 80s territory is where it gets fuzzy for me sometimes. There were a few different 80s albums, and I usually get them out of order. Well, actually, between Signals and Moving Pictures, they actually released an album called Exit Stage Left. Exit Stage Left was a live album. It was they'd done one before, a show. No, it wasn't a show of hands. All the World's a Stage, and they did put out that in the 70s. It was about like every 4 studio albums, they'd then put out a live album. So there was this All the World's a Stage live performance, which is great. That's an excellent one. But then they picked it up even more, and they did Exit Stage Left. And that was a lot of the albums from that segment of their career. A lot of the tunes from that segment. So then they're getting into the 80s, and they're putting out albums like Signals, and then Show of Hands was in there, but I don't think it was next. Signals, and then Power Windows, I think, is what came next. Signals, Power Windows. All the World's a Stage was the boy, I'm having to think. That's the live album, isn't it? I'm thinking about it now. I'm considering. Don't rush it. That's funny, Beartick. Yeah, as a drummer, I get told that. I used to get told that a lot more. Nowadays, I tend to drag. I tend to pull the tempo back more than anything. It's where I tend to sit more comfortably, is I don't want to rush. I don't want to push it too hard. And so I'll try to pull the tempo back a bit so people are not speeding it up. But then it's like I'm kind of underplaying, and people need me to push the tempo at times. So I have to work harder to push it. It's an odd thing. Maybe it's because I'm getting old. I'm just thinking through it here. So, okay. So the Rush chronology, I'm just trying to figure out where we're at now. And I want to do this all from memory. I want to see how much I remember. So the 80s are fuzzy, but I know we've got Signals, Power Windows. There's Show of Hands is in there somewhere. I think the Show of Hands was a live album, or was it All the World's a Stage? It's one of those two. All the World's a Stage might have been the one in the 70s. All the World's a Stage was the one in the 70s. I think that's what that was. And then Show of Hands was the 80s live album. But there's another one in there that it's not coming to my mind. I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it come up. But yes, Brune's Bane is off of the Exit Stage Left. There's a interesting little guitar solo that he played right before they went into the trees. And that's a good one. That's a favorite of mine. Oh, I hear my beautiful lady bear. She's letting the dogs in the back. Grace Under Pressure. Thank you. Thank you, Best Answers. I knew you'd come up with that. My brain didn't want to say Grace Under Pressure. Also one of my favorite albums. I should have known. Roll the Bones is coming, but that's more into the 90s. That doesn't come quite yet. We're getting there. Yeah, slow mode is on. You're right. Harold Green is here. What's up, man? Yeah, we're going through the history of Rush today, and how they've affected me as a drummer. Little caveats about that as we go along. So I'm just trying to think through it here. The 80s, we have, like I said, you've got the Signals, the Power Windows, Grace Under Pressure, and then Presto was coming, but I don't think quite yet. That's more getting toward that 90s era. I think another album in there. They got the Show of Hands came up in there, and then I think after that was the Presto, and then you get into Roll the Bones, and you've got Chronicles released around in that time. You've got Counterparts in the early 90s as well, and that's an album too. When I first started to find out about some of the later Rush stuff, well, for me it was more recent. It was like Counterparts, and then after that was Test for Echo. And Test for Echo changed the game entirely. At that point, between Counterparts and Test for Echo, Neal had switched to DW drums. He was now playing DW stuff, and he'd taken drum lessons and taught himself, not taught himself, he'd relearned it from a guy named Fred Gruber, how to do traditional grip again. So those of you who don't know, there's two basic grips for drumsticks, right? You've got what they call matched grip, right? Where the hands are essentially a mirror image of one another, and you hold them at about a 90-degree angle, create that little triangle. Matched grip, the hands are essentially doing the same thing, right? But traditional grip, you take the left hand and you lay the stick like this. You're not flipping you off here. That's not what that is. But you lay the stick in here between your thumb and your first finger, and the first finger sort of lays over the pointer there. The middle finger sticks above, and then the stick rests between the second and third knuckle, or the first and second knuckle, excuse me, of the ring finger lays right on top of there, and the pinky is just underneath for support. And then the motion, instead of being, like this, where you twist and you bring it down with the fingers and all that, this motion is different, and it's usually done on the left hand. It's the way it's been done for a lot of reasons that I'll talk about in a moment. But you're here, and the idea is you twist like this, like a doorknob. That's how I was always taught. You twist like a doorknob, and you bring it in, or you can bring it up and whip it down, whip downward to hit that snare drum, right? That's the idea of that grip. So Neal switched over to this traditional grip at that point in time, and that whole album was played with traditional grip. Is a completely different approach. He, instead of thinking I'm hitting like a golf swing where I'm trying to play through the ball, when I hit my drumstick to the drum head, I'm like playing through the drum. That's the previous way he'd visualized it. Now he's thinking, no, I'm working to play in a circular motion. Like the bottom of that circle is the bottom of my stroke, right? And then I'm done with the stroke when I come all the way back up. Circular motions, right? Like this. That's his thinking now, because he's trained to think of time as not dots on a line, but points on a circle, right? And think in cyclical time. So it changed his entire approach. And he took lessons for quite a while, reinventing himself. And that's when I really started to become aware of him, was around this time. And he had this double VHS set for instruction on that, all the songs from that album. It was called A Work in Progress. And he talks a lot about his insights on these different things. Really impressive stuff. Really, really neat to see his whole mindset in the way he writes tunes, so creates parts for tunes. But also his change in his approach to drumming. The way he sets his drum set up was totally different at that point. Just a lot of new things he'd invented in himself and his playing. And it made me think more deeply about how I was doing that. So we're at this point in their career, right? We've gone through the 80s and the 90s kind of hurriedly. But just some really interesting changes. They changed with the time. They got much more of an 80s feel to them throughout that time. Sorry, I got a hair on my mic. It's kind of gross. Had a lot of different interesting changes in their music from the 70s into the 80s. Even the early 80s, the Tom Sawyer stuff and the Moving Pictures album, into the Signals album was a very different tone. You got more keyboards going on. Power Windows gets more of that 80s pop feel to it, but still very Rush. Tunes like Big Money, always some of my favorite. You get into stuff like Red Sector A and Distant Early Warning. Those are some of the great 80s tunes of theirs that are favorites of mine. But then you come into this 90s stuff, and now that it's sonically, it's changing again and getting a different overall tone to the music. And then by the time you get to past like that era of Presto, Roll the Bones, and Counterparts, now we come into, and they had an album that I think was released around that time. It was, I can't think of the name of it. It had Tinker Toys and stuff on the front of it. It was very interesting. It was like a 3-disc album, 3 discs. All live stuff. And the third disc was a bonus from a live show back in like 78 or 9 over in London. Super, super cool, man. Loved the heck out of that one. But then I'm introduced to Moving Pictures, or not Moving Pictures, I'm sorry, Test for Echo. And I'm getting a lot of that stuff in my brain. I think it was after during the Test for Echo tour, right? That's when that live album came out, after Test for Echo was done. So during that time, then some personal things happened in Rush. Neal Peart's daughter, I believe her name was Selena. She was in a single car crash and was killed. And it was right after the tour for the Test for Echo album had finished. And this was after he'd gone through this whole stylistic change, all these kind of things. Suddenly he and his wife, they lose their only daughter. She's 19, I think, or 20 at the time. But pretty devastating. 10 months later, his wife Jackie dies of cancer. And I hear about both of these things around the same time. I hadn't known about either thing. This was like really, really early on in my explorations of Rush, maybe 4 years into it. And I didn't know until both things had happened. I remember being at marching band rehearsal, and one of our teacher aides for that a guy named Chris, different Chris than the one I was talking about before. He was a college guy. His dad was the band director, and he'd come in to help the drum line because he was a really talented drummer. And he told me, yeah, Peart's wife and daughter had gone. And I looked this up online. We had the internet at that point, just brand new internet. And I looked this up. Yeah, sure enough. And Neal got the heck out of Dodge. Nobody heard from him for a couple of years. He went on his motorcycle and just gone. Just off. Biking all over Canada and North America, throughout all of America, North America, and Canada and USA is what I'm trying to say. I don't know if he went down to Mexico or not, but just was not reachable for a couple of years. And eventually he came back. I think Alex Lifeson did a side project. Geddy Lee had a side project album he did. During that time, there was questions, was what Rush ever going to come back? And eventually, like early 2000s, he was around again. Yeah, he did. He went all the way to Patagonia. I didn't know that. That's crazy. I'd do that if I had the money. I'd love to go to Patagonia. That would be incredible. Ever since I saw The Princess Bride as a kid, and there's the scene in Princess Bride where Wesley and Buttercup are wandering through the fire swamp, and Wesley tells the truth about the Dread Pirate Roberts. He says, "I'm not the real Dread Pirate Roberts," and he gives the whole history of all these different Dread Pirate Robertses, and he says the real Dread Pirate Roberts has been retired 20 years and has been living as a king in Patagonia. And then I was like, where is this Patagonia? And I found out it's like at the bottom edge of South America, the bottom west edge of South America. And I thought, boy, that would be an interesting place to see. The bottom tip of Patagonia. Go up on a mountain somewhere there. That'd be an amazing thing. One day, it is a dream of mine to get to see Patagonia in person. But yeah, so Neal's doing his bike trek through the world and doing his stuff, and he eventually comes back. Decides to reintegrate into life. And, what are you going to do when you lose your wife and daughter all of a sudden? Yeah, Fairbear, I am not a mug clubber yet. I have some personal goals to reach before I will allow myself to become a mug clubber. And boy, do I want to. But I could do it for $69 annually, and that's what I'm going to do eventually. But I need to make some commitments first to finish getting rid of certain debts in my life. Better organizing my life, increasing my income to a certain point. And one of the gifts to myself will be joining Mug Club. And you will see a hand-etched girthy thing. Until that time, I will have to settle for something that, is just sort of in your face. You too, in about a week from now, can be the proud owner of a Pinder's Ugly Mug, right? You too can understand the joys of drinking from a beverage vessel that grins at you like an idiot and has animal magnetism. And you too, every time you sip from it. In fact, you too will also increase your animal magnetism with every sip. Your animal magnetism will go up by a factor of 10. And, Jews enjoy that factor of 10, all that tithing stuff. So get your Pinder's Ugly Mug and increase your animal magnetism today. That is my word to you on that note. No, Steve, you will have the magnetism of an animal, right? If you're with your gorilla face, you just put that out to people. That's what I'm saying. No, Steve Pender is a cool looking dude. I enjoy the heck out of him. He reminds me of one of my favorite drummers, a guy named Dom Famularo. Not Dom Tough, Dom Famularo. Who he's an old New Yorkish Jewish looking guy, and he's got a very similar face to Steve. Look up Dom Famularo. He's a gas and a half to listen to talk about drums. So much fun. Love that guy. I hope I'm fortunate enough to look like Steve Pender when I get older, right? Like 5 years down the road. He's not that much older than me, right? You're a spring chicken, Steve. At any rate, so Rush. Neal had all this upset, and he comes back into life, and eventually sort of sits at his drums and plays with that idea for a while. He says, I'm thinking I could do this again. Eventually, he calls up Geddy and Alex, and he says, maybe we could play some music together again. And they start playing with some ideas, putting some things together. It was real slow, and they were both real gentle with him because they're like, look, man, we don't want to push you. You've been through some crazy stuff. We're just going to take this a step at a time. But sure enough, they come out of the gate doing a new album. And they get out there doing this Vapor Trails album, which, wow. I got out of basic training, and my ex-wife, one of the gifts she had for me when I got done with basic was the entire series of Monty Python's Flying Circus on DVD. That was one. And the Vapor Trails album from Rush. So I knew it was coming. I knew it was getting ready to hit, and I was super psyched about it. And here we go. Brand new Rush album. Whole new world for me. And they've had quite a bit of stuff since that time. Baratic. Baratic wants the hairy back side of the mug, the Pender's Ugly mug. He wants it to be appropriate. Hopefully, I think he's wearing a shirt on both sides of the mug. I think that's probably how it goes. Man, you bears can squirrel the fudge out of me with hilarity. At any rate, we got this album playing in the car all the time. Like, I was constantly listening to that when I drive to work. Any chance I had, and I wasn't going to work too much yet. It was once I got to my first duty station in Texas. And, anytime I'd be driving, that album would be playing. Just so many layers to what was going on there. And he shortly after that album, he made another change. He'd been a Zildjian cymbal guy since he was a kid, right? And I even had some of Neal Peart's cymbals at that point. Like, not his specific, but the models he used. Like, he used 13-inch Zildjian New Beat hi-hats for years. He had a pair of Zildjian New Beat 13-inch for a long time. He also had a 19-inch Wuhan China cymbal, and I made it a point to have both of those in my setup so that I could have some aspect of my sound similar to Neal Peart's in homage to him. So yeah, he really impacted me a lot. I used Neal Peart sticks for quite a while. Big honking things. I don't use them anymore. It's just not my style. They don't really suit the way I play. But they were great sticks for a long time. I was a big fan. Yeah, big old China cymbal. Big, huge 19-inch China. Loved that thing. Wuhan makes up to like 27-inch Chinas, or at least they used to. Big honking cymbals you can get from those guys. At any rate, I said it again. I'm going to reuse all these phrases. I'm waiting for Levi to make a flipping video of all my reused phrases way too many times, because that'd be hilarious. Yeah, he'd come out of this, and they were getting out there touring again. And later they did the Russian Rio DVD that I got down the road a year or so later. And they left Neal out of all the press stuff and everything because they didn't want him to have to go through like talking over and over and over again about these things. But Neal did. He wrote a book called Ghost Rider, named after like the third tune on the new album. It talked a lot about his motorcycle trip, a lot of the experiences he'd had. So they're still going strong. They're doing this. They have their touring with this. They get another album going out there called Snakes and Arrows, and I think another one called Clockwork Angels. So they'd have like 3 new albums since all of this went down, and they'd been touring about that. They'd had their R30 tour. I think they recently had their R40. Well, I think it was not that recently. It was a while ago. 10 years now, because they're at their 50th anniversary now. But I remember going through the R30 and R40 stuff just not that long ago, and I don't know if they're dating that as to when Neal joined the band or before, but because this should be their 50th, right? Yeah, since 68 to now. But they finally made it into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I mean, the band has been through a ton of stuff in their career. They put out some great stuff. Their R30 discs that were filmed in Germany. You know, all kinds of cool stuff from that tour. And then they recently went through and had the R40 stuff. And It just keeps getting better. So it's a band, you have a huge catalog of stuff to draw from and look at any point of their career, how they've progressed. And as a drummer, I had this huge wealth of stuff from a young age to dig into. That's just gotten bigger even as I've grown. And it's really, really impacted me as a musician. It's drawn my attention to other great musicians like Dream Theater, wonderful band that I enjoy the heck out of. Steve Vai was previously of Whitesnake and then was putting out his own solo stuff, making his own career. Bela Fleck and the Flecktones, progressive Cajun sounding jazz, you know, a lot of that stuff, the banjo going on in there, really unique stuff that they would do. Victor Lamont Wooten and Roy Futureman Wooten on the bass and the drums, brothers that were part of that band. Jeff Coffin, one of the greatest saxophone players of all time. And Bela Fleck on the banjo. Definitely want to check them out if you've never heard their stuff. Neil Morse, previously the vocalist and keyboardist for a group called Spock's Beard, which you definitely want to check out as well. They're pretty cool. But then he starts doing his own solo stuff and has unbelievable albums. You haven't heard, got to check them out. All this world of music is being open to me now because of Rush. I was willing to consider these things that are weird stuff because of Rush and because of Neil's drumming. And that was like my standard, right? And I found drummers that I think are better than Neil in some respects. And he would probably openly admit that. He's good at what he does, right? Yeah, it's past that time, man. I keep getting my shows longer and longer and longer. I'm ready to land the plane here. I've been massively impacted by this stuff. It's made me a better musician. It's made me look at music in a much more broad way. It's opened my mind to a lot of things I probably previously wouldn't have considered. So they've been of a great value to me throughout my musical upbringing. And I always talk with my students about that because I want their horizons to be broad when they go through their musical life. And if you start on just simple AC/DC stuff and that's all you get to, or I don't know, just play pop tunes, whatever's out there today, and just say, oh, whatever you do there, we'll just do your favorite stuff and that's it. It's like, no, I'm going to play some of the best music of all time for you, right? I'm going to get your mind wrapped around that. I'll listen to classical stuff. I don't do it as much, but I'm much more open to it than I would have been if all I'd have been raised on was Pearl Jam or nothing against Pearl Jam, right? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the stuff that was mainstream popular is when I was a kid. If that's all I'd have been listening to, I probably would have been less interested in all that other stuff. I don't know. Just things I've been thinking about. Really grateful for that. 50 years for them. 3 months for me, you know, doing this gig. And yeah, it's been a wild ride, and I'm looking forward to more and more of it as we go forward. I'm ready to land this plane. I'm ready to head. And I want to tell you guys, I appreciate you being here. People are starting to drop away, and I don't blame them. So we're going to outro again. We're going to have to do it because it's the time for that. But you guys, think about the music you listen to. Think about expanding your horizons in it. Think about how it affects your life. And we'll see you tomorrow. Gauge your mind, gauge your body, gauge your heart. Seek to serve the ultimate purpose. Love you, Bears.